this. I want to welcome Sean Wise, Dr. Sean Wise. And for those of you who don't know, Sean was there at the beginning of Toronto Starts, and one of the reasons why Toronto Starts exists. It was Startup Toronto back then. I remember actually signing startup opportunities at the book signing where we had a meeting with you and Brad Feld way back. I'm going to say 6 years ago now. It's crazy how long ago that was. So Sean is a mentor of mine, friend, professor of entrepreneurship at Ryerson University, entrepreneur in residence for the first 5 years of Dragon's Den, helped launch that franchise and a Shark Tank in the 27 countries I think it's in now. Has written 5 books on entrepreneurship. I've read your students have received over $2.1 billion in funding. You moved in front of the camera with your own show on the Oprah Winfrey Network, The Naked Entrepreneur. I'm missing so much. There's so much more, Sean. Thank you for taking the time today, and welcome.
Well, thank you for having me and for that really nice introduction. I hope people feel as good towards me at the end as they do at the beginning. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to be here and about talking about one of my favorite topics. But I think in 2020, it's incredibly important that you not only hear the words, but you understand the context. So I'll ask you to forgive the un-Canadian nature of my first slide, which is really a self-promotion slide, but will also help you understand where I'm coming from. So all the things that Craig said are mostly true. The thing I'd like you to know is that I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. At 13, after getting fired, I started my first business. I sold my last business 2 years ago. And in between, I've had the opportunity to be a venture capitalist for 3 different funds, to work on some TV shows, to invest myself, to move forward, to be a scholar, but also a mentor. And I've written a number of books, and we can just click to show the covers. But what I want to really show you is what's on the next slide. And so this is just investments in the last 24, 36 kind of months. So Ryerson Futures is a seed fund. It's associated with Ryerson, the digital media zone, the DMZ. And I was really blessed that when I came over from venture capital to be there at the beginning. And together we look at thousands of opportunities to try to figure out the best ones for the university. So not only using our own university students and our own faculty, but things that would move forward priorities in the university along the different routes. So most of these are business to business. That's what I know mostly about, enterprise software. I'm not really a biotech guy, and I wouldn't know how to attract 1 million users if you want. I always laugh because my kids watch unboxing videos that have like 27 million views. And I teach a class in entrepreneurship, and my elevator pitch video, the most successful video I've ever had, is barely over 1 million views. So it's, it really tells you where people's focus on. But from your perspective, I want you to understand that's all the context. I'm right, I'm wrong. You have to decide for yourself. But what I'm going to share with you today is how the idea process has changed, how validating that process has changed, and what I've learned in that process. So we're going to do that under the heading of the next slide, which is just finding and validating your idea. We'll probably chat for about 15 minutes in a monologue-like format, my least favorite format, and then we'll open it up to calls and have real discussions, and hopefully we'll have more fun. So, when I turn to the next slide, I want you to understand that someone once counted that I've seen over 30,000 ventures pitched. So that includes the 20 years as an investor, that includes the seasons of Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, and the first question everyone always asks me is, what did you learn? Well, actually, that's not true. The first question everyone asks me is, if the sharks are so rich, why don't they ever change their clothes? And the truth is, it's because the show is not shot in order. The Shark Tank is filmed over 30 days and then edited. Each day is about 18 hours of video. So they're always taking a pitch from Wednesday with a pitch from Monday, and if they change clothes, they felt the audience would be upset. I don't know. That's the truth. As for what I learned that despite it being 2020, most people aren't up to speed at the new reality of entrepreneurship. Craig, next slide. People are still stuck in what Craig and I grew up with. When I did my MBA, they told you, you take an idea, you keep it so secretive. You keep it in a little bubble and you grow it, and then you go to get some investment. and you raise millions, and then you still don't show it to anybody. And then you build this prototype, and then you take it to market. And only then do you realize that nobody cares, that nobody wants what you're building. I mean, I started in venture capital in 1999, the .com, and you couldn't tell pet shop from pets.com. No one knew what worked or didn't work. But it's not 1999 anymore. We've moved forward. And in that process, the cost of launching a company has dropped. It's no longer $5 million to launch a jewelry store. My nephew could do it for $500 in a Shopify account and still have beer money left over. So what's really changed is because the cost has gone down, we've been able to democratize entrepreneurship. You know, when Craig and I were young, if you can believe that long ago, you had to know a rich person to sort of get angel funding or seed funding. You had to have a network. You couldn't just go on and crowdsource it or put it up on Product Hunt or even kickstart it and get firsthand revenue at the same time as feedback. You really believed you had to keep the secret, raise $5 million, spend all the money, and then hope for the best. But that started to change as the cost dropped to $500,000, as the cost dropped to $50,000. And now my students can test ideas for $50. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people need to get into the market to validate ideas, not just trust what their family says to them. Because your family loves you. And I'll be honest, I don't. And your customers don't. They want value for their money. And so we've moved away from this idea of, you know, build, invest, and then hopefully find a customer. We've turned it on its head. And my professor, Steve Blank, he called it the lean startup, and Eric Ries made it famous. And it's the idea that you build a prototype and you take it to market and you figure out what works with your customers, not behind closed doors. If you'll show the next slide, I'd like to summarize it up in one more, please. If you, I like to there you go. I like to summarize it as ready, fire, aim. So it used to be get ready, do all your research, write a 100-plan business plan, start building your product, and then when you've spent everything you have, see if anyone cares. But Steve Blank and Bill Aulette from MIT and design thinking, they really turned that on the head. And they said, if we can make things cheaper, then shouldn't we show them earlier? And that's really the secret formula. It's about getting out in front of customers who don't share your self-interest. It's about testing assumptions and doing that before you sold the kids to science to fund the business, before you've mortgaged your home. The number of times that people left the den crying made me so upset. I mean, because I would have hoped that earlier, before spending millions, they would have figured out that no one wants an easy boy chair that turns into a bicycle to get exercise. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So the problem that we had was, even after I learned at the Stanford way and the MIT way, I teach at Ryerson, and Ryerson is filled with real human beings from all over the world. And they're not MIT engineers. They're real people trying to do real things. So we had to spend 3 years, my colleagues and I, kind of figuring out how to make this more digestible. And that's what you'll find at the next slide. It's the same secret formula. We just took it from like those 4 lines to 100 discrete little steps. And some of these steps are like, get a website. And some of these steps are like, do a customer interview 100 times. But the idea now is that we've had 2 decades of entrepreneurial startups from 1997 to sort of 2017. And as a result, we've been able to learn and reverse engineer. So what I really want to do for the next 5 minutes is take you through that process. How is it in the 2020 that we do that? So we'll flip to the next slide and we'll see one portion. This is phase 2 of 100 Steps to Startup, right? You can find it at 100stepstostartup.com, but we'll give you all these slides so you don't need to focus on that. But what we do is each of these is a discrete video. Each of these is a discrete experiment. Each of these is a discrete worksheet. And it takes you step by step. And I'll just go through them so that you can see. So, you know, let's start with no idea. So let's say we have no idea. Show me the first slide after this one. Okay. So the first thing you do when trying to find a great idea is respect the fact that you are only one of many people and many opinions, so that you can't trust just your opinion. But that's the starting point. We always ask people, what customer segment are you from? So my customer segment is, let's see, I'm an educator, I'm a father of young children, I'm a comic book geek, I love science fiction, I love the cottage, I like fishing and boating. Okay, why do you care about a group that you're a member of? Because that's a group that you have access to. I know other comic book geeks. I know other parents with small children. But it's also a group that you have credibility with. And most importantly, it's a group that you have insights, right? So you start with a large and growing group, one that you have insights into, one that you can access. And you start there, and then you move to the next step, the next slide, right? You ask yourself, in this group of young parents, what is the biggest problem? What is the largest unmet market need? In fancy talk, we call that inelasticity of demand theory. You know, what would you pay $1 million for? Oxygen, water. What would you pay $10,000 for? A parking spot downtown Toronto. You know, what would you pay $10 for? Any meal in Toronto. But, you know, you're looking for the problems that your group has, and you'll know them because you're a member of that group. So let's just go with one off the top of my head. I'm a parent of young kids. I have a beautiful boys, my little dividends. One is 7 and one is 4. So I need babysitters. And I don't know about you, Craig, but I cannot stand having to call 18 high school young ladies and trying to see who calls me back in time, who texts me back, who's negotiating for more money, and then 3 of them say yes at the same time. It's just the most frustrating thing. And then they don't want to call you, they want to text you. I don't understand these people. But anyway, that's a big problem. So I would take that problem to the rest of my customer segment. Next slide, please. And I would test it, right? Because in 1997, I wasted millions of dollars on business plans that had never seen a customer, that had never seen someone who actually has to buy what you're making. And so today, when the cost to create prototypes and minimum viable products is so small, investors want you to show them, not tell them. Don't tell me you have lots of customers. Show me the purchase order. Don't tell me your customers love you. Show me that 99 first-time buyers come back within 30 days. So first you started with what group am I in? What customers would I serve? Then you started with what's the biggest problem? In my case, the babysitters. So now at the next parent-teacher meeting, while I'm standing around waiting, I'm going to chat with all those other parents, right? I'm going to chat with all those other parents, and I'm going to confirm that they also hate calling babysitters. But I'm also going to confirm that they're early adopters. That's something people always get wrong. Remember, the definition of an early adopter is someone who has the problem you're solving, someone who knows they have the problem, and most importantly, someone who's inefficiently trying to solve it already. So I'm wasting 8 hours calling babysitters. And let's just say I'm very successful and I'm worth $100 an hour. Well, the finding of babysitters just cost me $800. Now, I'm not actually paying that, but that's the stress and pain that I'm trading. So I would for sure buy an app for $9.99 that helped me find babysitters because it's better than the $800. And that's where we go to on our next slide. It's not enough to sort of get people's words, right? Talk is cheap. All the people I talked to said, go for it. You're amazing. Because they don't put anything of their own up. Who wants to be a bad Canadian and tell people something sucks? They all want to say, sorry, I only got a little time to tell you it's okay. And this is really about what we call traction or proof of concept. When I started in the venture capital business 20 years ago, proof of concept in the dot-com boom was I turn on a light switch and the light goes on. But in 2020, that's not enough. Working is not enough. In 2020, it's I turn on the light switch and I have recurring revenue because 8 people are reading under that light and paying me $1 an hour. People expect more than just good ideas. Talk is cheap. Execution is what makes money. And so I make a little list here. Now you'll be asking, Craig, because I know I can see it on your face, why is there a ladder there? We use that ladder as a sign of climbing up the rungs of traction. So whatever you have is good, but you want to move up. So if you have nothing but a website, maybe clicks are enough. How many people were interested in your solution enough to go to your website, right? But if I can get people tracking by having them sign up, well, that's way better. If I can have them become active users, that's way better than signups. If I can have them pay. And so we call that in school the ladder of consideration, because consideration is the legal term of what you're getting in return for the app. I'm giving Facebook all of my pictures and it's giving me unlimited storage. There's a relationship. And so the 4th step in this process is now that you know the group you're serving, now that you know the problem you want to serve, now that you validate all that, let's see if anyone will pay. This is my favorite step. This is the step where you create a solution and you click a buy now button. It doesn't sell you anything. It just takes you to a page that says, thank you for confirming your interest. You know, we're 90 days away from launch, maybe a little white lie. And if you give us your email, we will be sure to put you on our beta testing list. Now, when someone comes to me and says, I have a great idea, okay, I like people, so I believe them. When someone comes to me and says, I have a great idea, I put up a landing page, and in 24 hours, I had 800,000 registered email addresses. Okay, now I'm starting to think there's more to this. And by the way, that's a hybrid story. The real story is about Dropbox. They put an explainer video up and they ended up getting like 80,000 signups in 2 days. They didn't have a product. They just had a video of a product that didn't exist. But this step is really about confirmation. Because how am I going to look at my wife and say I spent our whole life savings if I haven't gotten the proof along the way? And so this whole process of marketing ideas and validating ideas is really about building up evidence. Evidence that investors will like, evidence that your spouse will like, evidence that your co-founders will like. Let's move on. When you're showing people evidence, you're showing them what the fancy people call a minimum viable product or a minimum viable offer. You're trying to show people the thinnest piece of solution that works. It's much easier to think about it this way. Craig, close your eyes. Let's say you want to create a restaurant. So you want a chain of restaurants and you are so enamored with maple syrup from Canada that that's going to be the theme of the restaurant. Everything in the restaurant is maple syrup hamburgers, maple syrup drinks, everything. So Craig wants to take millions of dollars and build these franchises and open the doors. Who would ever let him do that, let alone his spouse or any of his friends? Because you don't know that we need a restaurant with maple syrup yet. I think we do, but I don't want to influence him. So I tell him, let's create like a small experiment and confirm that you're not the only person in Canada who loves maple syrup restaurant themes. So what is the minimum viable product of a restaurant? Well, if you got lots of money, maybe it's a food truck. Maybe it's the world's first maple syrup food truck. Or maybe you don't have lots of money. So maybe you convert an old ice cream cart or an old hot dog vendor and you take it to the, I guess we don't have big hockey games anymore, and you take it to the subway station and sell at lunch your wares. What if you can't even afford that? You know what our students do? They take some of those products from the menu and they go at the farmer's market. They pay $50 to get a table for the day and they give it away. And they have a little booth on the side. And if you taste their hamburgers, you have to leave a little video testimonial. But they're trading the consideration of the feedback, of the confirmation, of the endorsement in return for that bite of food. And that's really what a minimum viable product is. It's the ugliest version that still solves the problem. I'll give you one more example. When I was a lad and I did school assignments, I had the world's worst spell checker, my mother. She could spell any word, but boy, did she make me feel stupid every time she did it. She would circle them in red and make me repeat them, and it was awful. So when the world's first piece of software came out called Spell Checker, you can be sure I didn't want my mother ever reading my work again. Now, the fact that Spell Checker was $29 and it only checked 1,000 words, the most commonly used words, that didn't bother me because it wasn't my mother yelling at me. Now, of course, that's a fiction, right? That isn't really how it worked. But you can see that minimum viable spell check, it covers 80% of the mistakes. So you're going to get the result. You're getting better spelling and you're getting it and paying for it, proving the need. And then you can add French and you can add 1 million words and you can add grammar and you can add other things. But when you get ready to start raising money and showing what you're selling, you got to have that prototype because otherwise they're just looking at air. Let's keep going because we're going to finish up right about now. The idea I guess I want to leave you with is that the 21st century entrepreneurship model is very efficient. It costs a lot less. You don't have to quit your job. You don't have to sell your children and mortgage the house. What you have to do is break it down into assumptions around your business model and test them. When you get the test right, you go on to the next assumption. When you get the test wrong, you pivot. Let's keep moving forward. We call this in fancy talk the hypothesis-driven entrepreneurship theory. It's the lean startup. You take your assumptions, you build it out in a business model canvas or a lean canvas, and you test them one at a time. The stuff that doesn't work, you drop. The stuff that works, you double down on. Let's keep moving forward. If this was all way too fast for you, we are happy to slow it down. One of my favorite things is to contribute, and we have a program called 100 Steps to Startup. I believe Craig is going to have a promotion with you and give you a code to make it even less. But that's where we walk you through this process. Next slide. And in each of these steps, we have a video and an experiment and a worksheet, and they go in little teeny steps. So some you can do in an hour and some can take you a month. But the idea is that before you risk everything, before you quit your job, especially when you're a first-time founder, you want to make sure you stack the deck. You want to make sure you know things that you can solve. And we can do that because we've had Tinder, we've had Uber, we've had Google, we've had Facebook. And that's what 100 Steps to Startup, that's what the Lean Startup is about. That's what design thinking is about, right? Next slide. We made it for people like you, right? You don't need more than a high school education and a desire to be successful to make it work. Right? But I want you to do that in an efficient way, in a less risky way, because I don't want you crying leaving the Dragon's Den. Next slide. This is if you're still, want more of me, I would never try to self-promote, but if I was, this book just went into its third printing, its startup opportunities, and the hippie beside me is my mentor, one of the greatest venture capitalists alive today, Brad Feld. And a good friend. And so we wrote this book to stop people, because you'd be surprised, Craig. People like stop me in the bathroom, on planes, in lines at restaurants. Can I pitch you my idea? So imagine how it feels to be Kevin O'Leary, where you can't go anywhere and people are pitching. This book is all about that. This book is about modifying general opportunities for you personally. How do you choose A versus B? And what it's based on is 5 seasons of Shark Tank, 5 seasons of Dragon's Den, and Brad and my sort of side chair commentary on what's really going on. Because it's great television. I love it. Dragon's Den is a lot of fun now in its 20th season. But the real world is the real world. And I don't need good ratings. What I do need is less people to fail. I need less people to waste government grants and more people to be great entrepreneurs. And with that, I think I'm very close to the end. Anyway, I don't know how much of my time I've taken. I've probably talked way too much. Craig, over to you, sir.
You could never talk too much, Sean. I think everyone loves to hear all you have to say, because I learn more and more every time I talk to you. And thank you very much. I just put the link into the chat room, and you'll see it later. I think it's almost $150 off the program right now. So I just want to follow up with a couple of questions. Can you tell us a time when a startup wowed you with their idea right away? And you knew right away that the idea and the team was a winner?
Yeah. So it's really more than just the idea. It's the team, the idea, the timing, the market. I'll tell you 2 stories, because out of 30,000, 2 stick out. The first was on Dragon's Den, season 3. A young lady from the East Coast came forward, and her name was Barb Stegman. And the company is called 7 Virtues. And in a nutshell, what they do is they use ingredients from conflict areas around the world to make cosmetics, to make perfume. So instead of giving money to the government of Afghanistan, they buy poppies from the farmers direct at double market price to use in their perfume to make it a different company. And I loved the idea. It was a real blue ocean strategy. No one was doing it. Plus the ingredients was readily available, and it was a real differentiator. And Barb herself was just a spitfire. Brett Wilson ended up backing her. She's now in Sephora and hundreds of stores across Canada. 7 Virtues, Barb Stegman. Highly recommend you Google that video. She does an amazing job. I believe in season 15, she was awarded the best social venture in the show. But you can see it. In the end, she paid back Brett Wilson his money. He refused to take any interest. He refused to take any equity. He gave her back the business 100%. And she's gone out to be just so tremendous. And she tells it herself. She comes from poverty, and she found a way. So that story always sticks with me, because when I first met her in the green room, I knew from that exact moment that she was going to not only knock it out of the park, but I knew that she had what it took to be successful. The second is much more in my sweet spot. I had a great opportunity to meet a young man, I guess he's not so young anymore, named Mike Katchen. And he was pitching a business called Wealth Simple. And I just thought to myself, What a great idea, right? A blue ocean strategy focusing on millennials who are not being targeted by big investment funds, people who have $5,000 to invest, not $500,000 to invest, because there's got to be way more of them, right? If it's the 1% and the 99 have a lot too. So how do you get it out there? And then the whole shtick about we have no offices because we have one big server and it's an AI and all of that. Whether I believed it or not, whether it's accurate or not, it's just a great opportunity. Unmet market need, proprietary way to solve it, exponentially better than what's out there. But most importantly, people are already doing it, but they're doing it in a terrible way. What did young university students do before Tinder? They went to the college bar and they got, turned down time and time again. Tinder is simply a more efficient business model of the same activity. And that's something you can test. And so when I heard the Wealthsimple pitch, when I heard the 7 Virtues pitch, it just really resonated.
Keep your questions coming, by the way. That was great. So with the theme idea of idea validation in mind, we've heard some ideas that you knew were winners right away. Can you share a time where you were very wrong about a startup idea and team?
I've been very wrong way more than I've been very right, both on the businesses that I've created. I've only had 2 major exits and 3 pretty miserable failures, but that's par for the course, right? The one I'm most embarrassed about, the one that I always say when people say, you would never tell me if you picked wrong. The one I tell you all the time, I'm very proud to say. I totally screwed the pooch on Shopify. I was in an airport heading from Ottawa to Toronto when my phone rang. It was like 2008 or 9. I can't even remember the year. And I was getting on a plane, and this person who ended up being the founder was pitching the idea of storefronts. And Yahoo had a storefront, and Amazon offered storefronts, and Google stores already existed. And I just couldn't get my head around just like how big that industry was going to be, how big the side hustle was going to be, how many people need to have, not full entrepreneurship, not a full-time job, but something in the middle. And he did what Paul Graham, the famous venture capitalist, always says, right? He went before everyone else. He saw that was going to be a trend, and I couldn't see it. And the reason I couldn't see it was because I wasn't his customer. And when he did become successful, he did write me the letter, because I tell everyone who I shit on that I would look forward to telling you in writing that I was wrong. I want people to succeed. It's no joy in my life making people sad, but he is one of a half a dozen people who have written demanding that explanation. And I've been happy to send it to him because he was right and I was wrong. But the reason I was wrong was because I was thinking my opinion was more important than the customer's opinion. I hadn't yet learned the lessons I shared today. It's great that you think that, but I better see that the customers think that. And since I'm not in every customer segment, right, I'm not a Tinder user, I couldn't possibly have insights. So I need to be smarter than that. So now what we do is we speak to customers more. We start to understand how you developed it. So yes, I was dumb enough to pass on the seed round of Shopify. And if I had, I would be, I don't know, more rich.
So how do you know if this is an idea you can stick with? If a lot of founders think that, this is a good idea, but I always like to ask, is this an idea that when the going gets rough and you don't know how you're going to pay your employees, you're still going to get off the couch and go into work and figure out how to make it happen? How do you know that?
So I agree with you. That's a huge, difficult decision. It's do I double down and keep going? I've already got $20,000 in this business, or do I cut my losses? So I'll take it in 2 parts. The first part is that exact question. So I let data do it. And I don't mean the guy from Star Trek. I mean, I let the data of experimentation do it. If my partner Shari shows me an experiment and we got like 1% and the baseline is 40%, then I know we got to fix something. But it's not so much as about quitting the idea, because now we iterate. The problem people have is not listening. So 18 people tell you don't make Teslas all pink, and then every Tesla off the line is pink. That's what's causing the disconnect, because you're thinking that you like pink, so everyone should like pink. But on the bigger question, it's not enough that it be a great opportunity. It needs to be a great opportunity for you. You have to be in the customer segment. You have to have insights. You have to be obsessed with those customers. Because again, at 2 a.m, if you're not all of those things, you're quitting. And that's what differentiates. There's a lot of great opportunities. I'd love to build a Star Trek teleporter. I have no technical way to do that, so it's not a good opportunity for me. I try to focus on things that I have insights on, things that I'm a customer of, both as an investor and as a founder, and things that I would do whether or not I was paid for it.
Those are great answers. So here's a question I get all the time. Everyone loves my idea. I need $800,000 for my startup. Everyone loves my idea. So, if everyone liking your idea, is that enough?
No, 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 no. Talk is cheap. I don't need 80 people to tell you you're great. I need 80 people to put $10 on the table and say, hold my spot in line. It's too easy for people to blow people off, especially in Canada where everyone wants to be loved and be thoughtful and say sorry. And it's can't. The second thing I'll tell you in most of those cases, they're asking the wrong people. What the hell do you care that a 50-year-old professor doesn't understand Tinder? Right? I'm happily married. Like, it's not for me. It's the 20-year-old single person that needs to understand it. And so if I'm like, sounds like a good idea, if your mom tells you that, it's because there's a bias in there. They want you to succeed. Now, I would like to think I like people enough that I would tell them the harsh, cold truth, and the tears say that I'm right. I believe that's more important than just telling people, oh, okay. But the truth is, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what your early adopters think. And it matters that you can get them on the same page. And again, I'm not talking about your first customers. I'm talking about reversing it. An early adopter has the problem. You don't go sell a babysitting app to me until you know that I need to find a babysitter. And so it's really important that not just people say yes to you, but that the early adopters are the one whose feedback you're taking, because they're the ones who will put up with it when it's not perfect. They're the ones that will accept your apology when the server goes down. They're the ones that'll say, dude, I'd pay you double the money if you made it private. And that's what you need more than investor money. That's what makes less mistakes. That's what gets you closer to success, not what's in your head, but what's out of the building in your customer's head.
It's great. So, and we've got a couple of questions on this, so I'm going to kind of summarize this. So, lots of people want to start something, but they're looking for that really great or really big idea that no one has ever thought of. And, they don't want to enter a market where there's a competitor, or they need that real billion-dollar idea. How important is that, having a great startup idea?
Not. It is a poor excuse that is enabling you to not start. It's forcing you to be an entrepreneur. If you wait for your idea to be perfect, you'll never start. No idea is perfect. So instead, start with your real goal. Your real goal is to be successful. Do you care that you did a business to consumer site or a business to business site? If you get $20 million as a payout, probably not. So it's less about the idea. So instead of starting with the idea, start with the customer. Start with what groups you're a part of. Then explore what inelastic issues are still out there. In my case, parenting the babysitter app, right? Is a babysitting app a good idea, a bad idea? It's a big enough idea. But if you start small and you grow, then it will turn into an opportunity. It's not about ideas. It's about opportunities. And the key thing that's different, and I'll break down all the literature and academia and all the research, is this one thing. You get off the couch for an opportunity. It's the action of converting an idea into an opportunity that creates the opportunity. I told you before I would love teleporters because I hate Air Canada, right? I would love it. But that's not a realistic science at the moment. That's not a possibility. So it can't be an opportunity, right? But finding a babysitter without 8 hours of phone calls, that's an opportunity, not an idea, if I take action on it. And so all those people with ideas, stop thinking about them. Take 2 or 3 of them and go find the customers for them. One of them, you won't be able to get the answers you want, so out the door it goes. One of them, you'll find the confirmation you want. And guess what? Maybe it's not exactly what you dreamed about on day one, but if you watch any of these success stories, Richard Branson, Elon Musk, the Google boys, they never end where they start. That's the difference. It's only in the movies that they have a dream. And if you build it, they will come. In the real world, it doesn't work that way. In the real world, you take a good idea and you make it great by working with customers, by running experiments, by letting data drive you. It'll never be great, and you'll never get off the couch.
So you've seen it all when it comes to startup ideas. I like to say I've seen it all, but you've seen it all. What do you look for when hearing an elevator pitch on a new idea? That person who's in the airport lobby who's got 30 seconds of your ear, what actually captures your interest?
I want to know what he knows that I don't know. So, I studied the same methods that Paul Graham uses. You want to know not what's going on today, but in 5 years, what opportunities will exist. So I'll give you an example. In 2021, Apple will release augmented reality prescription glasses, like the Google Glass 10 years ago, but actually good ones that people will use. And so now I'm exploring what apps will be the killer apps on that platform. Right? GPS was the killer app on the phone. The camera was the killer app on the phone. You and I are old enough to remember pre-smartphones, yep. Right? What will it be for the glass? I'm betting it's going to be what they call small network facial recognition. So it goes into Facebook, and only people you're friends with, it can identify. So if you're suffering from Alzheimer's, or you're having other issues, or you're like me, you're just too dumb to remember anyone's name, it would flash in front of you. So again, that is not even real, but the software is real. The platform's coming, and someone's going to make the opportunity sit together. So what do I look for? I look for people who have a proprietary perspective, people who worked in the salt mines for 20 years and realized if only we did it this way, we would have exponential benefits. I don't look for pie in the sky people. I look for people who suffer the problems they're trying to solve in exponentially huge ways. It's not good enough. Email did not kill the Postal Service because Dear John letters arrived 1 day earlier. It killed it because email was 1 minute, and a letter from Hong Kong is 10 days. And if you're breaking up with someone, that's too long. So email destroyed it because of the exponential speed, right? Tinder destroys the need for the bar, although I guess COVID could do the same. But the idea here is that you have to know something I don't. And usually that's around a proprietary solution for a problem that's still very small, but going to grow.
I know there's a few people in the chat room who are looking to get an idea. They're trying to start something, but they don't have an idea yet. Do you have any tips on how you generate a startup idea?
100%. Obviously, now's when I say you go to www.100stepstostartup.com. But it's the stuff we talked about today. It's about finding a customer and then identifying the unmet market needs. Too many people start with the idea and then can't find the customer. You've got to start with the customer. So you start with, what customer groups am I? Am I a newcomer to the country? Am I a banker at RBC? Do I like water polo? Do I vote libertarian? All of these are different types of customer segments, and each group has its own set of problems. And if you're a member of that customer segment, you'll be able to not only see those problems, but have insights on them, have credibility about them, but most importantly, you'll know where to find other people like you, other customers. And so when you don't have an idea, I think it's the best. It's what we call tabula rasa, blank slate. You have nothing to stop you from finding a great idea. What bothers me is when I have to tell someone who spent $1 million that their idea is flawed. I'd rather them take the first 7 or 8 steps of 100 steps and work through idea generation, work out idea validation, but you won't get a great idea. You'll get a good idea, and then the other 90 steps will make it great.
So we got a question in the chat room here about how would you go about building an MVP if you're non-technical? So this person and their co-founder, they're not technical. So got any advice on where to start with that?
It's a huge question, and it's a huge problem. So the first 50 steps of 100 steps, you don't even need a minimum viable product. The first ideation stages, you don't need that. The first semester course, you don't need any technical, because you can build up a mock-up, you can build up a web solution, you can build up screenshots to get you through the customer ideation phase. Once you've gathered 1,000 people who say doing it this way is worth paying for, then you're going to have to out and either acquire technical resources, learn to code yourself, acquire a co-founder. That issue is really a problem a little later. So once you have that technical resource, you're not done. right? Because that's the first version. When the customers come back and say, pink isn't the color, blue is the color, you're going to have to paint the whole thing. And if you don't have that technical resource, you won't be able to apply the paint. One of the greatest things that startups can do for themselves is increase a metric we call pulse. Pulse is how many iterations a year does your product go through. So if I have a company that iterates every week, they're getting closer and closer to the goal line because they're making small little changes, changes in price, changes in channel, changes in feature set. When you don't have a technical resource, pulse gets very, very slow. You can only launch one version every other month. And then it takes you a month to get the information. And then to implement it, you need another technical resource. It isn't that the MVP can't be built. You can outsource that. It's what are you going to do with all the feedback? So we strongly recommend that you learn to code. Now, when I say learn to code, there are learning to code that actually doesn't involve code. There's more and more software systems that are drag and drop. So what you see is what you get. So when I say learn to code is, you can't start a business if you can't produce the MVP. It's just a terrible idea because you can't iterate it. If Craig wants to start a maple syrup restaurant, he better have a recipe book of maple syrup food. Otherwise, he's got nothing. How is he supposed to be the founder of a business when he doesn't have any insight? So I think it's dangerous to start a startup without resources to build the minimum viable product. But it doesn't end there. You need a technical resource to iterate. But more and more, those technical resources can be out of the country. Those technical resources can be co-founders. But you don't even need that on day one. Day one, you can do all the first testing with just screenshots and customer discovery interviews.
It's amazing what you can do with PowerPoint and some graphics.
Mm-hmm. Again, Dropbox had 80,000 signups in 48 hours, and it was a video. A video. It didn't work. It wasn't even a download. There was nothing in the video that told you what it looked like. It was like stickman drawing. You can go see it. If you look up explainer video, Dropbox, you'll see it on YouTube. There's thousands of them. But they just had a video and a sign up here button. But 48 hours later, 72 hours later, who was laughing? They spent $50 and then could raise whatever they needed because they had the proof that people cared.
So how much does competition matter in a market? The question is, if a market doesn't, if you don't have competitors in pursuit of the same opportunity, how do you differentiate a bad idea versus a gold mine?
So first, I think I have to stop the myth. The myth is that, it's on either end of the spectrum, right? You want competition because it validates that it's a big enough problem worthy to go out. If 6 billion people on Earth haven't thought of the idea, maybe it's just too out of the box. At the same time, you don't want Google Trends, which tracks how many searches on Google happen a day, to be trending in your topic area, right? Because the idea is that you want to focus when there's 1 or 2 competitors and before there's 5 or 6. And the reason has to do with bringing people onto speed, explaining how it works, general halo, but also we can validate a market and yet not know which of the 3 solutions will work, right? VHS or Betamax, right? They're 2 solutions to the same problem, asynchronous TV watching. So, they're great until digital cloud comes along. So I think that you can't be afraid of competitors. I know that I had to lecture people on why they cannot say on Dragon's Den, we have no competitors, because people just laugh. Because they just either the idea is so ridiculous that no one's ever thought of it, or you're so stupid you don't know how to use Google. Because the truth is there's so much entrepreneurial activity. There's over 1,200 accelerators in the world now, right? Not just Techstars and Y Combinator. So when I look at it, you want a few competitors, but you don't want too many. Too little is as bad as too many. It's like what your mother always said. You want just enough, not too much, not too little. The Goldilocks version.
So I that's great. And we have another question here, and I'm going to combine these two. And we talked about knowing when to pivot, and you mentioned following the data before. So what KPIs or what data do you measure to know, should I continue improving and testing, or is it time to give up?
Wow. That is a fabulous question. So KPIs means key performance indicators. On a human, a key performance indicator is your weight, your heartbeat, your pulse, and your body temperature. A doctor, reasonable doctor, with those four things could probably judge whether or not you're in trouble, right? Same with your business. KPIs aren't vanity metrics. I don't really give a shit on the number of clicks on your website, okay? I care about how many people actually took action. So for me, it's not a vanity game. The KPIs that I like are always data points like week over week user growth. Why? Because it's not important that you had 10,000 users last week. It's important that you had 10,000 users last week and 100,000 users this week and 1 million next week. It's about lines, not dots, right? Dots on the graph, 10,000, 1 million, you know. It's about the line that connects them. And so you need a KPI that represents that. So the most famous ones are Dave McClure's, his pirate metrics, because they make the sound "arr," right? So acquisition, activation, revenue, return, and referral. So how often do people come back to your site? So Jeff Bezos doesn't sit up at night wondering how many people have an Amazon account, because at one point or another, it's just more than you can count. He worries about how many days does it take the average person to come back and buy the second time, and is that number going up or down, right? He's not sitting there looking at the actual sales because the numbers are just too big. He's looking at the difference. And so people always write to me, we have 10,000 users. I say, that's great. How many years did it take you to accumulate them? 10 years. That's great. I think that's wonderful if you're a B2B business that sells $100 million units. It's not going to work in a B2C app. But it's not about the telling of it. It's about the showing of it. And it's not about the dots. It's about the lines. Week over week user growth, week over week churn, week over week revenue increasing. Things that are real metrics. Now, again, I'm not saying revenue, because sometimes usage, right? YouTube, week over week increase in the number of minutes watched by an individual. Facebook, weekly minutes spent per user average. Those are what matters. And so the danger is using vanity metrics, clicks, how many newspaper articles were written about me. I don't give a shit. Newspaper articles are great if they lead to sales.
So when is it time to walk away is the big question, really.
So only you can answer that question. Only you can answer that question, and it changes. You know, when you have millions in the bank, it's a different level than when you have that. What I like to do is on day one, write out the goals, and then break those goals down into sort of quarterly goals, you know, monthly, however you want to do it. But you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, are we doing these goals? Are we moving the needle forward? Maybe my partner couldn't find a channel in the first month, but in the second month, we found a channel to sell to, and it's good. So it's about progress. When you should stop is when you're sick and tired of not moving forward. I don't know how to be a little more political than that, but people are going to slam the door in your face the rest of your life as an entrepreneur. You don't need 90% of them to answer. You need 10 of them to write you checks. So it's your own decision. But at some point you realize we have no longer forward momentum. And that's usually a good sign. You know, 3 or 4 of your experiments have shown that what your assumptions aren't really true. And when you change those assumptions, it won't work. You know, I had a company pitch me, and they were pitching retail insurance for millennials, right? And so I'm not a millennial, so I'm like, well, they need insurance. So I called my cousin Dustin, who's a millennial, and I had him call 100 of his friends and ask them how many people have insurance, how many people want insurance, what would cause them to buy insurance. And to a T, I don't have insurance. I don't want insurance. My parents will pay for my burial. I have no dependents or spouse. Who cares? I default on my visa. Don't mind. And so no one wanted it. In particular, if they did get insurance, they wanted $500,000 to $1 million payout, so it was useful. And you can't sell that $9.99 a month. So what's my point? The point is that when we went to those assumptions and proved them false, we knew to stop the business. Because without that assumption being true, there was no business. You can't sell insurance if 100 of 100 people are adamantly opposed to insurance. So
Yeah,
for me, that's what I look to.
And if you haven't set a baseline yet or set those goals, start now. If you don't know
Okay.
when to stop, stop now. Start setting your goal and say, I need to hit this by this time, or otherwise you're going to keep asking yourself, what am I successful? Am I not successful?
100%. If your goal is to make revenue, your goal is to break even, your goal is not to lose money, your goal is to make money, whatever it is, you need to write it in advance. By December 31st, I will have my first dollar of revenue or I will stop. Because you are the only one who can make that decision. Your spouse doesn't want to tell you that. Your business partners are flipping it over in their head. But you got to be real. You got to be careful you don't put good money after bad. And again, it's easy from the sidelines to say that. Having done this a number of times, I can know it can be very difficult.
I have a question in the chat room about trying to validate a subscription app and whether it's a good idea to offer a free trial on your landing page or subscribe for 7 days or whatnot for validation.
So we had a slide on this earlier. It's a ladder and it's a bunch of steps. So the best thing I can do is get you to give me $7.99 sight unseen. It's not even available yet. It's not even around, but just give me money ahead of time. And people do that all the time. They call it Kickstarter, right? So the best thing is get me 1,000 prepaid Kickstarter subscriptions. That always is impossible. So maybe you go one level less, a free week, and then we convert. But then the KPI changes, right? It's not week over week growth, it's week over week conversion change. So are we converting more of the pool? And if that's not good enough, it's the free subscription. But the problem is many people will say yes to free and no to 10 cents. So you got to be careful that they're not diluting you by accepting the subscription and then moving you to the unsubscribe box. So I think you can use landing pages. I think you can use Kickstarter, and I think if you can make a sample issue or a sample of the subscription, and even if it's not real, even if it's a subscription box that's just your stuff in it and you're videoing it, people want to understand that. But again, it's action. Money beats my email address being collected. My email address beats you clicking anonymously on a survey. My clicking anonymously on a survey beats you going to my website. It's a ladder, and you always try to go one more as high as you can, because that influences how likely you are that you found a true opportunity. If people are willing to pay you $7.99 sight unseen off a landing page, there's a real need here.
Any techniques for validating the pricing of your product or service?
Yeah. So the problem with pricing is you need a high volume throughput to run experiments. So Amazon can do pricing any way they want because there's 1 million people a day on that site, right? So we may all think we're getting the same price on Amazon, but Amazon is likely reading our postal codes and changing the price based on our buying behaviors. And that's not illegal in their terms and conditions. But when you have to do pricing, you need volume. So what you end up doing is what's called an A/B test. You sell the same product for $7.99 and $9.99, and then you use a little gate, a piece of software gate that sends 50% of the website visitors to A and 50% of the website visitors to B, and B has $9.99 and A has $7.99. And then I say, okay, I had 1,000 people. 500 went A, 500 went B. Of the 500 people in A, 200 bought at $7.99. But aha! Look at this. At B, 60% bought. And so it's actually better to be high priced. And then you run it again. But instead of $9.99 and $7.99, it's $9.99 and $19.99. And you just do that over and over again. But you can't do that if you're a B2B business with 6 customers. Like you can't, because you're going to burn them. I'm going to get upset that you got one price and another. In the B2B world, it's mostly give away your first pilot and then get the people to tell you what they would have paid for it, and then try to charge that with your second pilot, discount it, and then try to charge it with your That's how we do it. You almost do it like when you sail. You crisscross towards a point, but it's easier to visualize when you have thousands going through your website and you can run an A/B test. But if you're selling business to business, it's the same A/B test. It's just so much slower.
So where does idea validation end? Or does it just end up morphing into something else?
So the process of validation never ends. There are 9 components of a business model, customer and problem and channel and price and all those things. And each of them is filled with assumptions. And each of those assumptions needs to be checked. So I would say maybe the first two boxes, problem and customer, maybe problem, customer, and segment. The first boxes of the lean canvas or the business model canvas. Idea validation ends after those points, but you're still doing validation. You're just validating price. You're validating channels. You're validating competitive analysis. But the idea validation stops once you have heard the same stuff from multiple sources ad nauseum. Let me slow that down. If I go out to sell a pilot to 100 school boards and they all say the exact same thing, I want it if it was pink. There's your validation, change it pink. So you are supposed to keep experimenting on every assumption until you have confirmatory data. 3 people said $9.99, right? And then you can rest easy. In the B2B world, it's all anecdotal. I meet with my companies every week and they're like, oh my God, we were in a meeting and it was like, I could read the words coming out of his mouth because I'd already heard it 8 times. That's when you stop. When you have overwhelming evidence that the assumption has been validated. Because if you build a business on assumptions that aren't validated, it's a very weak foundation. But if you go through those assumptions in a scientific manner, like 100 steps or the lean startup process, it takes you through it. So yes, idea validation is really the first part, but you'll spend the rest of your life validating it. Apple validates products, right? Google validates product. Amazon runs hundreds of A/B tests a week. We just don't see them because we're only viewing our membership.
And since we're out of time, can you give us...
Are we out of time? Wow.
Yeah, we're out of time. So I just wanted to, if we want to learn more about 100 Steps to Startup, do you want to just give it another description on who should try it out?
So we wrote 100 Steps to Startup for first-time founders or any founder who wants to know what to do next, who doesn't want to wake up every morning and try to figure out what do I do and what order do I do it in. Entrepreneurship has changed a lot, and more importantly, we now know a lot more. It's not this black box. It's not this art or this science. It's a practice. And this is simply the tools to drive through that practice.
So I really appreciate you taking the time, Sean. Hopefully we're going to do this again soon.
I look forward to it, and I always appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone, for attending. This was really great, and I'll have this video posted in the next couple of days. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.